Are there any differences, if so, between maybe doing genealogy in the States and genealogy in Canada, and maybe the difference in the I guess justice system overall?
So definitely there are big differences doing genealogy in Canada because the privacy laws here are a lot more stringent. So for example, in Canada, the latest census data that we have access to is from 1921, whereas in the US, the latest census just came out was from 1950. And
Mm,
that's a number of generations if you're trying to build somebody's family tree that you
right.
can't reach because you're going all the way back to the 20s, and it's the same like birth records, death records, things like that. You're going back to like the 20s if you're trying to figure it out. So whereas in the United States, in some places, you've got birth indexes that go up to, 2000 and something. So you can really have very more recent information. There's also a lot of people finder sites like Spokeo or Been Verified that you can use as part of your genealogy research on living people. So you can take somebody's email address and pop it in there, and it'll give you, information on a person, their address, their social information like Facebook's or whatever that might be linked to it.
Hmm.
Whereas in Canada, we don't have that. So it makes it a lot more difficult to track down living people in Canada. I mean, it's nice as a Canadian to have, your privacy, but as a
Right.
genealogist who's trying to track people down, it makes it a lot more difficult. I think in terms of the justice system, there's a lot more emphasis in the United States on precedent and what has happened before. Whereas in Canada, there's a tendency to take things sort of more at face value and to evaluate each case on its own merit. And I know also that there have been some cases in the United States where things get thrown out or people get acquitted because of technicalities where things were not done correctly. Whereas in
Right.
Canada, they may say for certain cases, okay, well, yes, technically you shouldn't have done this. Hopefully you'll know for next time and you won't do this again. But
Mm,
we're still going to allow this to go forward because you have the evidence that shows that this person did the thing that they did. So it's a little different, but overall, a lot of the principles, like the Fourth Amendment, we also have the right to be free of unreasonable search and seizure and things like that. That similar sorts of things in our charter that you guys have in your constitution that are protected.
right. Seems like you guys have a good way for less loopholes, because I feel like maybe more American law, the way you described it, I don't want to say nothing bad, but you can definitely over here manipulate it
Get
out,
caught in the crossfire. Yeah.
right, right. And so it seems doing it that way, it may be more intention based. Seems it could, I could definitely see that being more helpful as opposed to just like going off precedent or sticking to every single step, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, there is the opportunity there for, because and to a certain extent, I can see that there need to be consequences for not following the rule of law. Like the reason why we
Hmm.
have a justice system and how we can keep it just is making sure that people are following the rules that have been set up. But at the same time, I think that when you are basing everything on precedent, you're not allowing law to evolve. As the science evolves, a lot of things evolve.
Mm,
And so if we're basing things on, things that happen where, even looking at DNA, we're talking about collecting abandoned DNA, and this is true both in the US and Canada. It's garbage, and so it's something that's thrown away, and you can collect somebody's abandoned DNA and do stuff with it. And okay, when you're just getting STRs, which is kind of like a fingerprint for a person, it's not very identifying the DNA that you're collecting. That's one thing. But when you're doing, SNPs, you're collecting information that you can now get from their DNA, medical information, and all kinds of very personal information about somebody. I think maybe that's something that we need to reconsider, whether or not, abandoned DNA is still fair game. And I don't know that if in the US, the law will be able to keep up with these different kinds of ideas about it. Whereas I'm hoping that in Canada, it will.
right.
Yeah.